The sun hung low over the dry land, spreading a soft golden light across the quiet valley. Sheriff Caleb Turner adjusted his hat as he rode along the narrow trail, the sound of his horse's hooves echoing in the still air. He had traveled this road hundreds of times, but today felt different. Something in the wind, in the silence, made him alert. He had learned long ago that the land often whispered warnings before trouble arrived. Caleb was known for being steady, calm, and fair. People trusted him because he listened more than he spoke. But lately, things in the region had changed. Tensions between settlers and the Apache community were rising again, and new government orders had been sent to every sheriff's office. The orders stated that any indigenous person found traveling without official permission should be taken into custody and handed over for labor contracts. Caleb disliked the cold language used in the orders, but he had been raised to believe that laws were meant to be followed. It was not his place, he thought, to question the people who wrote them. As he continued down the path, he noticed something unusual near a cluster of rocks. There were footprints, small, light, and hurried. Someone had passed through recently. Caleb's hand tightened slightly on the reins. He guided his horse forward, following the trail until he reached a clearing. There, standing calmly near a fallen log, was a young woman dressed in simple, traditional Apache clothing. She did not run. She did not hide. She simply watched him with steady eyes. Caleb dismounted slowly, making sure his movements were calm, so he would not frighten her. She stood tall, though he could see she was tired. Her hair was braided, though parts had loosened from wind and travel. Her expression was neither angry nor fearful. It was thoughtful and observant, as if she had prepared herself for whatever this meeting might bring. "What brings you out here alone?" Caleb asked, keeping his tone polite. The woman remained silent at first. Then she pointed to the horizon. "I am searching," she said softly. "Searching for what?" Caleb asked. "My brother," she replied, her voice full of quiet determination. "He went missing weeks ago. I followed his tracks until they disappeared near this town." Caleb studied her carefully. She did not appear dangerous. She carried no weapons besides a small knife for practical use. Her feet were dusty, her eyes tired. It was clear she had traveled far. But Caleb also knew he had orders to obey. According to the papers in his office, she was not allowed to be here, no matter her reason. Before Caleb could speak again, two of his deputies arrived behind him. They had been trailing him at a distance, and now stood ready, hands near their belts. "Sheriff, need help?" one deputy asked. Caleb hesitated. He did not want this meeting to turn into something harsh, but the deputies already recognized the woman, and they knew the new rules as well as he did. "We need to bring her in," the second deputy said quietly, as if the decision was obvious. Caleb looked at the woman once more. She met his gaze with a calmness he could not understand. There was no anger, no fear, only a sense of strength and acceptance, as if she had known this might happen. After a long pause, Caleb nodded. The woman did not resist. She simply nodded once and allowed the deputies to guide her toward their horses. Caleb felt a strange heaviness settle in his chest. He told himself he was only doing his job. But for the first time in many years, his job didn't feel right. Back at the sheriff's office in town, people paused to watch as the deputies led the woman inside. Townsfolk whispered among themselves. Some looked curious, some looked indifferent. Nobody questioned the arrest. They had become used to the new rules. Caleb unlocked a small room inside his office, clean, simple, with a wooden bench and a pitcher of water. "You can rest here for now," he told her. "Thank you," she replied quietly. Caleb closed the door gently. But even as he stepped away, he could not shake the feeling that he had done something wrong. He walked to his desk, sat down, and looked at the official papers again. One sentence caught his eye. "Any individual detained must be turned over for labor service without delay." He frowned. The words felt heavy, cold, and unfair. That evening, when the streets grew quiet, Caleb walked back to the holding room. The woman sat on the bench, her hands resting calmly in her lap. She looked up as he entered, I didn't ask your name earlier, Caleb said. Nayeli, she replied. It means? He began gently. It means I am loved, she said. Caleb nodded. That's a strong name. Nayeli did not smile, but her eyes softened a little. My family gave it to me. My brother used to say it meant I should never forget how important love is, even in difficult times. Caleb felt a strange ache in his chest, though he couldn't explain why. You said you're searching for him. What happened? She took a slow breath. Some men came to our village. They dressed like soldiers, but acted differently. My brother thought they were leading a group of young men to work, but they took him somewhere far, instead. We heard nothing after that. Nayeli paused, gathering her thoughts. I followed their trail. It brought me here. Caleb listened quietly. He believed her. There was honesty in her voice, an honesty that didn't need to be proven. Yet the rules he was expected to follow did not care about honesty or intention. You know, Caleb said softly, I don't think you meant harm by being here. I meant no harm, she agreed. Only peace. Her words were simple, but they stayed with Caleb long after he returned to his desk. That night, Caleb sat alone, staring at the papers on his table. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the windows. Inside, the dim candlelight flickered quietly. He felt torn, caught between his duty and something deeper inside him that told him this law was not right. The next morning, the town officials arrived early. Their boots echoed loudly on the wooden floor as they entered his office. One of them, a strict man with sharp eyes, placed a document on Caleb's desk. Sheriff Turner, he said firmly, we expect you to follow the federal order. The auction is scheduled. The Apache woman must be prepared for transfer. Caleb felt his throat tighten. She came here searching for her brother, he said quietly. She wasn't doing anything wrong. The official waved a dismissive hand. Her reasons don't matter. The rule is clear. People like her must be handed over. Don't make this complicated. The words made Caleb feel cold inside. He forced himself to nod, though his heart resisted. After the officials left, Caleb stepped outside and watched the town. People were going about their day, some buying supplies, some talking near the well, children running with laughter. Life felt normal, peaceful, and yet in a small room inside his office, a woman sat waiting for something she did not deserve. As the hours passed, Caleb found himself walking back to her room again and again. Not to question her, not to guard her, just to look, to think, to try to understand the strange feeling growing inside him. Nayeli remained calm. She did not ask for release. She did not beg. She simply waited, her strength shining quietly through the walls. Every moment he spent near her made one thing clearer. She was not a criminal. She was a sister searching for a lost brother, and he, a sheriff sworn to protect the innocent, was about to hand her over to people who would treat her without care. A heavy conflict began to grow inside him, one that would soon push him toward a choice that could change everything. Obey the law he had sworn to uphold, or follow the voice inside him that whispered, he must protect her. That whisper grew louder with each passing hour, and Caleb felt his life shifting, piece by piece, toward a decision he had never imagined making. Caleb Turner had always believed that following the law was the right thing to do. Since the day he became sheriff, he had told himself that rules existed to keep order, and order kept people safe. But after Nayeli's arrest, those beliefs began to shake in ways he never expected. Every morning when he walked past her small holding room, he felt a disturbing heaviness settle on his shoulders. It was the same uneasy feeling he got when something didn't feel right. And this time, that feeling grew stronger with each passing hour. Nayeli did not behave like someone who meant harm. She did not shout, she did not resist, and she did not hold anger in her eyes. Instead, she held quiet strength, as if she had learned long ago that fear never solved anything. She spoke only when spoken to, and her voice was calm, almost steady, even though Caleb could see she was tired. Her clothes were dusty from travel, and her hair was loosely braided, as if she had not rested in days. Every detail about her reminded Caleb of someone who had been on a long and difficult journey. The town officials, however, did not care about any of that. They only cared about orders. Whenever they visited Caleb's office, they reminded him that the auction date was approaching, and they expected him to do what was written in the documents. According to those papers, anyone without proper permission in the restricted territories had to be handed over for labor contracts. The rule was cold and clear, with no space for kindness or personal decisions. Caleb hated the rule for the first time in his life. One afternoon, when the sun hung low and the air outside grew warmer, Caleb found himself standing outside Nayeli's cell again. She sat quietly on the wooden bench, her hands resting on her lap. She looked up when she heard his footsteps. Her eyes were gentle but tired, the kind of tiredness that came from worry and searching rather than from lack of sleep. "You said you were looking for your brother," Caleb said softly, almost unsure why he was starting this conversation again. "Yes," she replied. "He disappeared weeks ago. He went to follow a group he thought were soldiers. I believe they took him." Her voice did not shake, but he could see her fear hiding beneath her calm words. Caleb leaned against the wall, thinking about her story. Something about the way she spoke made it hard to doubt her. She did not try to gain sympathy. She simply told the truth in a steady voice. "Why did you come this far alone?" he asked. "Because no one else could," she said simply. "My mother is ill. My father died seasons ago. My brother and I are all she had. I could not just wait at home." Her words hit Caleb with surprising force. He had spent years serving his town, but hearing her talk about responsibility made him realize how many people lived under rules they had never agreed to. She had come all this way out of loyalty and love, and yet the law saw her as someone who needed to be taken and sold. The thought made Caleb's stomach twist. Later that evening, after the deputies left, Caleb sat at his desk, staring at the documents he was expected to follow. His lamp glowed softly, casting warm light on the paper. Every sentence reminded him of what he was supposed to do, but none of it felt right. He rubbed his forehead, trying to clear his mind, but the discomfort only grew. He remembered the moment Nayeli was brought in. She had looked exhausted, but not defeated. There was something courageous about her, something honorable, and now he was supposed to send her away to a place that would treat her without fairness or kindness. The thought was unbearable. The next day, more pressure came from the town council. One of the council members, a stiff man named Braxton, walked into Caleb's office with a stern look. He didn't bother hiding his impatience. "Sheriff Turner," Braxton said sharply, "the auction is in 3 days. I hope you are preparing everything. We do not need delays." Caleb kept his voice steady. "I'm aware." Braxton narrowed his eyes. "Good. Because outsiders have already heard about the event. A few groups might arrive early. We need you to keep everything in order." Caleb nodded, though his heart grew heavier. The idea of strangers coming to claim Nayeli made him feel sick. She was not property. She was not someone to be traded. She was a human being searching for her family. After Braxton left, Caleb walked outside for air. The sky was clear, with soft clouds drifting lazily. Children were playing near the well, laughing and running, their families nearby. Everything seemed normal, peaceful, and yet just a few steps away inside his office, a woman sat waiting for a terrible fate because of unfair rules. Caleb felt anger rise, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that builds slowly and sits heavily in the chest. He had followed rules his entire life, but now he wondered if rules alone could make a man honorable. Maybe honor came from doing what was right, even when the law disagreed. That evening, Caleb brought Nayeli a plate of warm food. She looked surprised, though she tried not to show it. "Thank you," she said softly. "You shouldn't be here," Caleb said, surprising himself with the bluntness of his own words. Nayeli studied him carefully. "But I am. And I cannot change that." Caleb sat on the small chair outside the cell. "You told me about your brother. If you had found him, would you have taken him home alone?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "We have walked long distances since we were children. We know how to travel. We know the land. Caleb nodded slowly. You are brave. Her eyes softened. I only do what I must. Anyone would, if someone they loved was missing. Her words stayed in his mind long after he left the room. Caleb had no children and no close family. But he knew what loyalty meant. He had sworn to protect the people of his town, but was he protecting them by following an unfair rule? Or was he protecting the comfort of those who wrote the rule? Each day that passed brought the auction closer. Each hour made Caleb's internal struggle stronger. His deputies did not question anything, but they noticed he was quieter than usual. Caleb avoided their questions because he had no answers he was ready to share. One afternoon, 2 travelers entered the sheriff's office asking about the auction. The way they talked made Caleb uneasy. They asked how many captives would be available and whether they could inspect them beforehand. Their casual tone made Caleb realize the auction was nothing but business to them. After they left, Caleb walked into the empty hallway and leaned against the wall. His heart beat faster. The thought of Nayeli being handed to people who cared nothing about her story or her dignity filled him with dread. That night, Caleb sat alone at his desk again, staring at the candle flame. Every moment he spent thinking only made his mind clearer. He could not follow this order. He could not let Nayeli be taken away by careless hands. The next morning, he went to see her. She looked at him with calm curiosity. You said your mother is waiting for your brother, Caleb said. Yes, she replied. She has hope. I cannot let her lose both of us. Caleb felt a deep ache in his chest. He knew then that he had made his decision days ago, he just hadn't admitted it to himself. You deserve to go home, he said quietly. Nayeli looked at him carefully, sensing something important in his tone. But the law? Sometimes the law is not right, Caleb said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. And sometimes a person must choose what is right, even when it is difficult. For the first time, emotion flickered in her eyes, hope mixed with disbelief. Caleb turned away before he could second-guess himself. He walked toward his office door with heavy steps but a clear mind. He knew what he needed to do. In the days ahead, the town would expect obedience. The officials would expect him to prepare the auction. Strangers would arrive with their own intentions. But Caleb had already chosen his path. And it was no longer one built on cold orders. It was a path of conscience, and soon, he would act on it no matter the cost. Caleb Turner did not sleep that night. He sat at his desk long after the candle burned low, staring at the papers that demanded he follow orders he no longer believed in. Every line in the document felt heavier than the last, and each word reminded him that he was running out of time. In 2 days, people from nearby towns would gather for the auction. They would come with their money, their interest, and their cold curiosity. And Nayeli, who had shown nothing but courage and calmness, would be handed over to strangers who saw her as nothing more than a name on a list. The thought made Caleb feel a sharp discomfort in his chest, not fear, but something deeper, something he hadn't felt in years. It was the quiet voice of his conscience, whispering that he could not let this happen. As dawn broke across the sky, Caleb stood from his chair, his legs stiff from sitting all night. He walked to Nayeli's holding room. The early light slipped through the small window, drawing soft shapes across the floor. Nayeli was awake. She sat on the bench, her back straight, her hands resting gently in her lap, and, as always, her expression held a quiet strength. You're awake early, Caleb said softly. I could not sleep, she answered. My mind kept thinking. Caleb nodded. He understood exactly what she meant. His mind had not stopped thinking either. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Finally, Caleb stepped closer and lowered his voice. Nayeli, if there was a way for you to leave this place, would you trust me? Her eyes widened slightly, not with fear, but with surprise. She studied him carefully, searching his face for meaning. Why would you help me? She asked softly. Caleb swallowed. He didn't have a perfect answer, only the truth. Because what is happening to you is not right. Because you came here searching for someone you love. Because you did nothing wrong. and because I cannot allow the law to harm someone who deserves kindness." Nayeli watched him for several seconds that felt much longer. Then, she nodded slowly. "If you chose to help me, I would trust you." Those simple words sealed Caleb's decision. A weight lifted from his chest, replaced by a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. He stepped back and took a deep breath. "We don't have much time. We need to leave tonight after sunset." Nayeli's heartbeat quickened. "Where will we go?" "To your people," Caleb answered. "To safety. To anyone who can help you find your brother." Her eyes softened with gratitude. "Then I will be ready." Caleb nodded, but inside he felt nervous. What he was about to do would cost him greatly. He might lose his title. He might lose his reputation. He might even lose the trust of the entire town. But he knew he could not let an innocent woman be taken away. The rest of the day moved slowly. Caleb acted as if everything were normal. He walked through the town, managed small disputes, checked in on the deputies, and wrote a few reports, none of which he truly cared about. All the while, he felt the weight of time pressing down on him. He needed to act carefully. If the deputies grew suspicious, they might interrupt the plan. If the town officials visited unexpectedly, they might notice something was off. And if anyone saw Caleb and Nayeli leaving together, the consequences might be immediate. By late afternoon, Caleb returned to his office. He spoke to his deputies with a calm voice. "You both can go home early today," he said. "It has been a long week. I'll handle the night watch." The deputies, grateful for the surprise break, thanked him and left without question. Once the office was quiet, Caleb locked the front door and took a slow breath. The moment had arrived. He walked back to Nayeli's room and opened the door quietly. She stood up the moment he entered, her face calm but expectant. She held a small cloth bag, one she had made from scraps he had given her days earlier. It carried only a few things. A small blanket, her water gourd, and a piece of cloth from her village. "I'm ready," she said. Caleb nodded and handed her a long cloak. "Wear this. It will help you blend in once we leave town." She wrapped it around her shoulders. The fabric was oversized, but it hid her clothing well enough. Caleb led her through the back of the office, where a small gate opened onto a narrow alley behind the building. The alley was quiet, shielded by tall wooden fences. The evening sky was turning shades of pink and orange, giving them just enough light to move safely without drawing attention. They walked quickly, Caleb leading the way, and Nayeli following close behind. Every step felt precious, every sound, every shadow, every breath mattered. When they reached the edge of town, Caleb's horse stood waiting. He had prepared the saddle earlier, making sure it was secure. "You'll ride," Caleb said. "You know the land better than I do. I'll walk beside you for now." Nayeli hesitated. "You will walk? But the path is long." "I'll walk," Caleb said with a small smile. "I want to keep you safe." For the first time since he met her, Nayeli's expression softened visibly with emotion. She climbed onto the horse, steady and graceful. Caleb took the reins and guided them toward the open land, beyond the town. As they traveled deeper into the countryside, the silence of the land surrounded them. The stars began to appear, one by one. As the night sky slowly unfolded, the air was cool, carrying the soft smell of earth and distant trees. After some time, Caleb spoke. "You said your brother disappeared near the old canyon?" "Yes," Nayeli replied. "Many trails lead there. My people sometimes rest near hidden springs in that area." Caleb looked ahead thoughtfully. "Then we'll go there first. If anyone from your tribe is looking for you, that's where they will be." They continued traveling, sometimes talking, sometimes moving in silence. Caleb asked her questions about her village not out of curiosity, but to understand her better. And Nayeli answered with calm honesty. She told him about her mother, who was gentle but strong. About her brother, who loved stories and always tried to help others. About the small celebrations her people held during the spring, when new life returned to the land. Listening to her, Caleb felt something shift inside him. The world he had known, the one shaped by strict laws, rules, and barriers felt suddenly smaller than he had ever realized. There were entire communities living lives full of meaning, peace, and love. Yet the world he served treated them like outsiders. Hours passed, and they finally reached a small ridge overlooking a hidden valley. The moon cast a soft glow on the landscape below. Caleb pointed toward a narrow path that led downward. "That way," he said. "It looks like a natural trail." Nayeli nodded. "My people often choose paths like this. Quiet. Safe." They continued down the ridge until they reached a cluster of tall trees. And then Caleb heard its soft voices. Nayeli froze, her breath caught in her chest. "I know these voices," she whispered. "They are from my tribe." Caleb's heart beat faster. He stepped aside, allowing her to move ahead. She approached the shadows slowly, her steps careful. Then, from the darkness, figures emerged, 2 elders and a young woman. When they saw Nayeli, their faces lit with relief and disbelief. "Nayeli!" the young woman cried, rushing forward. "We have been searching for you." Nayeli embraced her, and the elders placed gentle hands on her shoulders. Their voices trembled with joy. They spoke softly, their emotions filling the air. Caleb stepped back quietly, giving them space. This moment belonged to them. After a few minutes, Nayeli turned toward Caleb. Gratitude shone clearly in her eyes. "You brought me home," she said softly. Caleb shook his head. "You found your way. I only helped you walk the last part." One of the elders approached Caleb. He looked at the sheriff with calm respect. "You did something brave today," the elder said. "Thank you for seeing her as a person, not as a rule to follow." Caleb swallowed, humbled. "I only did what felt right." Nayeli stepped closer. "Sheriff Caleb, your kindness will stay with me for the rest of my life." Caleb felt a weight lift from his chest. In that moment, he knew he had made the right choice, even if the consequences awaited him back in town. He gave her a gentle nod. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." And with that, he turned back toward the path that led home, a path filled with uncertainty, but a path he chose with a clear conscience. When the sun slowly rose above the distant hills, the small town seemed calmer than before, almost as if nature itself was waiting for the final chapter of their story. The sheriff stepped out of his office early that morning. His steps were firm, but his heart was heavy with thoughts about the last few days. Everything had changed so fast. What started as a simple order had turned into a test of humanity, courage, and truth. He stood near the quiet street and looked ahead, wondering what the future now held for him and for the Apache woman whose life he had saved. The woman, whose name was Nalan, came out of the small safe house where she had been staying temporarily. She walked slowly, looking at the morning sky with calm eyes. After days of fear and uncertainty, the brightness of the sky gave her a feeling of hope. She felt thankful for the kindness she had received from a man she had never known before, a man who had risked his own safety to protect her. And now, she knew it was time for her to decide what her next step would be. She approached the sheriff, who was standing quietly, lost in thought. He turned his head when he heard footsteps and gave a small smile. There was no fear or tension between them anymore. They now shared a connection formed through bravery and trust. Naleen asked softly, "What happens now?" The sheriff took a slow breath. "That depends on what you want. You are finally free. No one can make decisions for you now. You can choose your future." Her eyes softened. Freedom was something she had always valued, something her people had lived for. But freedom now came with a new uncertainty. Should she go back to her tribe? Should she stay? Would she be safe anywhere? These questions silently circled in her mind. The sheriff noticed her struggle. "You don't need to decide right now," he said gently. "There is no pressure. You can take your time. But whatever you choose, I will make sure you're safe." She nodded, appreciating the simplicity and honesty in his words. Later that day, the town people slowly began returning to their normal activities. The tension that had covered the streets earlier had finally faded. Whispered conversations still circled around the sheriff's actions, but the tone had changed. Some people, who had once judged the sheriff, were now quietly admitting they were wrong. Others admired his courage. And a few realized that kindness sometimes required more strength than force. Meanwhile, the sheriff went inside his office to finish the final paperwork related to the case. As he sat at his desk, he thought about his life. Years of working under strict rules, following orders, and never questioning what was right. But now, he felt something had awakened inside him. He understood that law alone was not enough. Sometimes one had to listen to the voice inside that guided toward humanity. As he was writing, there was a soft knock on the door. When he opened it, he found Tom, the deputy, standing with a serious but warm expression. "I wanted to talk," Tom said, "about everything that happened." The sheriff nodded and invited him inside. Tom sat down. "At first, I didn't understand your decision," he admitted honestly. "I thought you were going against the rules for nothing. But after seeing how things unfolded, I realized I was wrong. You did the right thing, and I'm proud to stand with you." The sheriff felt a sense of relief. He respected Tom and valued his opinion. Hearing him say those words felt like lifting a weight off his shoulders. "Thank you," the sheriff replied. "It wasn't an easy choice, I know," Tom said. "But you showed everyone what justice really means." The two shared a quiet moment of understanding. It felt like a new chapter in the town had begun. Outside, Nalin walked around the town, watching the people and observing the world she was now part of. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with respect, and a few with hesitation. But none of them showed the hostility she had seen earlier. She felt lighter, as if the burden of fear she had been carrying for so long was slowly fading. As the day moved forward, she returned to the sheriff and asked, "Can we talk? There is something I want to say." They walked toward a peaceful spot near a large tree that offered shade from the warm sun. The air was calm, and the sound of leaves rustling created a soft, comforting background. She turned to him and said quietly, "I am grateful. You didn't know me, yet you risked everything to help me. In my world, gratitude is not just a feeling. It is a bond. I want you to know I won't forget what you did." The sheriff listened carefully. Her words were simple, but they carried deep meaning. "I didn't do it for thanks," he said. "I did it because it was right, and because no one deserves to be treated unfairly." She smiled softly. "Even so, I want to honor it. I will go back to my people soon because they need me. But before I leave, I want to say that your kindness will live in my memory forever." The sheriff respected her decision. He knew her heart belonged with her people, but he also felt a small sadness, knowing that their paths might never cross again. In the afternoon, preparations began for her journey. A safe path through the woods was arranged, and Tom ensured that no one followed or disturbed her travels. The sheriff packed food, water, and other supplies, making sure she would face no difficulty on her way back. When everything was ready, they walked to the edge of the town where the forest began. The trees stood tall, sunlight passing through the branches in golden streams. It was the same path she had once traveled in fear, but today, she walked toward freedom. "Thank you," she said again, her voice gentle but strong. The sheriff nodded, trying not to let emotions show on his face. "Take care of yourself. And remember, you are always welcome here." She gave a final look at him, a look filled with respect, gratitude, and an understanding that words could not describe. Then she stepped forward into the forest, her figure slowly blending with the trees. The sheriff stood there silently until she disappeared from sight. A slow breath escaped him, carrying both relief and a quiet ache. He had done his part. Now, the rest of her story was in her own hands. When he returned to town, people greeted him differently. They looked at him with admiration. They saw him not just as a lawman, but as a man who carried integrity. And he realized that sometimes, One brave act could change how an entire community thought and behaved. Night came slowly. The sky turned a deep shade of blue, sprinkled with stars. The sheriff walked home, feeling peaceful. He knew he had done something meaningful, something he would remember for the rest of his life. As he reached his home, he looked at the sky once more. Somewhere beyond the hills, Nalin was walking toward her people, carrying hope with her, and he believed she would build a strong future, just as he would continue serving his town with a clearer heart. Their paths had crossed unexpectedly, but the meeting had changed them both. He had saved her life, but she had reminded him of the true meaning of justice and respect. It was a lesson he would never forget. And so, their story came to an end, not with loud moments, but with quiet courage, new understanding, and a gentle promise that goodness could still be found, even in the hardest places. Their journey had started with fear, but ended with hope, honesty, and the belief that every human deserves dignity. It was not just the story of a sheriff and an Apache woman. It was a story of humanity winning over fear, of courage defeating injustice, and of two strangers changing each other's lives in ways they never expected.